Tēnā koutou katoa. I'm Matt Paterson. I'm Chief Advisor Policy and Programs here at the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment. With me today is Geoff Simmons, Chief Economist at the PCE. Thank you for hearing from us today. The Commissioner, Simon Upton, would normally be here to present to you, but he's currently overseas on leave and he sends his profound apologies. He wrote the submission. Time zones were our friend there. But today, time zones have worked against us. I think it's currently 4 a.m. in Paris. This is not a committee that the PC normally presents to, so we think it's worth recapping the role of the office. Parliament set up the PC deliberately to be independent of the executive. The Commissioner's role is to provide evidence and balanced advice to all MPs to assist you in making informed decisions about the environment. As you'll know from reading Simon's submission, he divided his advice into that on political issues and those that are more administrative. For the political issues, he simply laid out the pros and cons of the decisions that you're being asked to make to help you make informed decisions. The decision on removing the exploration ban or not is essentially a referendum on New Zealand's approach to climate change policy. The proposed change of the purpose is a choice to put the economic benefits of resource extraction ahead of environmental impacts, rather than providing flexibility to balance objectives. The introduction of government policy statements may improve short-term transparency, but could highlight medium-term political risks to industry. The administrative part of the submission highlights issues that should not be as political. They are issues about transparency and managing risks to the taxpayer. Here, the Commissioner does make specific recommendations to manage those risks, but in a way that provides flexibility for differing political views. The environmental costs of decommissioning, not decommissioning properly, are huge. The cleanup costs may then fall to the taxpayer. The potential costs are massive, hundreds of millions and into the billions of dollars. To help manage that, the PC's recommendations around risk management and transparency are: the Minister should be required to provide reasons for the quantum and timeframes for the financial security arrangements. Taxpayers are entitled to know what trade-offs have been made and why. We need to know, at least as a starting point, that the security arrangements are sufficient to cover both the quantum of costs and can be called on when those costs actually occur. Guidance on a minimum quantum and timeframe for financial security arrangements should be added to the bill. The Minister could still have flexibility to deviate from that minimum, so it wouldn't be binding. The post-decommissioning risks are also non-trivial, and there is no guarantee that the company will be around should those risks materialise. Financial security arrangements for post-decommissioning costs, or at least the option to set that security, should remain in the legislation. Thank you for your time today, and Geoff and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Looking around for any questions from members. Steve Abel.
That was way snappier than I thought it was going to be, so I wasn't.
We like to leave lots of time for questions.
You guys have got a bit of time, so I mean, in essence, the start of your submission outlines, or the PC's submission outlines, that the skepticism around the ban at the time, and the fact that the bigger impact of the ban was not necessarily on our domestic emissions, but its impact it may have on the global supply, because it locked away 4 million square kilometres of exclusive economic zone from exploration. So what is the view now in terms of the broader planetary goals as well as domestic goals that we have around transitioning away from our fossil fuel dependence? What is the view now of the value of the ban or otherwise?
Kia ora, Steve. Thanks for your question. I think we mentioned in the submission that the one area that has changed from our analysis back, around the time of the original ban, the one thing that has changed is that whole discussion around supply side initiatives, and there has been growth in that area. Whether you can trace that growth to New Zealand imposing its ban is the debatable point. But certainly the message in that area has gotten stronger that more countries are taking supply side constraints. So the strength of that argument has grown in that time, for sure.
And I think countries' climate change policies have moved on as well, and we're seeing that represented in free trade agreements. We're seeing it represented in international climate change negotiations. And if New Zealand's going to change its position and move against where other countries are going, I think that will be something that will be noticed internationally as it is going to be noticed domestically.
All right. Another question from Dan Bidema.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Hey, thanks for your submission. I just, before I get into my question, just really appreciate the submissions that you and your team and Simon does. Always found them really comprehensive, and particularly this one as well. In your recommendations, which I liked how you went, for those who support the ban, those who oppose, but you've said here, if the world continues to be far from meeting global temperature goals, then this ban has few upsides. Just curious as to whether the Commission, the Parliamentary Commissioner, has a view on whether the world continues to be, whether the world is on track to meet those global temperature goals.
Thanks for your question. I think it's fair to say that, and we are not specialist climate scientists in the office, but I think it's fair to say, and the scientific consensus would be that the world is not on track for the 1.5 degree goal. I think that's fairly clear. My understanding is that most on the basis of current policies, we're headed for somewhere between 2 and 3 degrees. But a lot depends on whether the current level of commitment continues to ramp up, and if the policies that come in behind those commitments are actually put in place.
And we're certainly seeing since 2018 quite a number of countries doing more and more in those climate policies. So while we might not be close necessarily to the 1.5 degrees, certainly the global momentum towards reducing those emissions and reducing warming is there.
Thanks very much, team.
Steve, Abel, you still have a question?
Yeah, I've got another couple of questions. I wonder if you guys have looked at all at the localized impacts of exploration, specifically any sort of literature reviews on seismic testing and its impact on marine species. I know there's various bits of literature on that suggests that it's quite impactful on cetaceans and possibly on crustaceans and plankton. And the other question is regarding, I had a specific question for the Minister earlier on in the closed session, which was around the use of dispersants in the unlikely but catastrophic event of a blowout, where the Corexit dispersant was used in the Gulf of Mexico, and there's some literature that suggests that perhaps it actually makes the problem worse if you start throwing on a whole lot of dispersants that are another additional toxin in the ecosystem. And I don't know if that's a level of detail that you've looked into from a localized environmental risk of oil and gas drilling itself, and specifically oil spills and seismic blasting.
No, we haven't gone down to the level of detail of either the seismic issues on marine mammals or the detail on the environmental harm that might happen when you're cleaning up or despite your good intentions. But we do specifically note, both in this and in a range of other things that we've talked about resource extraction, is that there are environmental costs with this. Yes, there are economic benefits, but there are also environmental costs. And those costs aren't negligible, and they're certainly not negligible when accidents happen. So that's why it's actually quite important to balance both the economic gains that you might get from that and the costs, and also why we stress in this submission the real importance importance of making sure that your financial security arrangements for decommissioning and for post-decommissioning risks are actually adequate for what will come if you need to do it. The costs of cleaning up are going to be far more, an accident will be far more significant than the actual cost of decommissioning. At the very least, taxpayers should not have to pick up that bill.
Can I ask a supplementary on that? Oh, sorry.
Let them finish that answer, and we'll have
yes, I hadn't realized that.
Thanks. I'd just like to emphasize, the logic of that is really important in the context of the government's strategy of a fuel agnostic, market-led approach to the transition. It's really important that that as part of that, all industries and fuels, for that approach to work, all industries and fuels must be on a level playing field, and that means avoiding any implicit or explicit subsidies to any particular industry, and that's why we have questioned the switch to promote in the opening clause of the bill. And the Commissioner was really clear in his submission that he wants to place on record that he doesn't think it's appropriate for this or any future government to offer subsidies, implicit or explicit, to underwrite the risks of exploration, whether those are political or otherwise. And there will be significant risks that any company moving into this space will face.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Mine's a sup on Matt's.
We don't have time for any more questions now. Thank you so much, Matt, and to the Parliamentary Commissioner's Office for your submission. Thank you.
Thank you for your time, and sorry the Commissioner could not be here.